Hello, everyone. We've made it. We're here. Don't know what all the fuss is about. I am joined by Mr. Mark Southerns and a very noisy Nat.
Oh, what's happened there?
Nat, you've made it.
Yes, finally. A lot of technical glitches. Finally, I'm here. I'm so embarrassed right now.
Well, don't touch anything or move like you just did, because that caused a ripple effect of pain through everything. But I think now you're fine. If you just say hello.
Hi, hello. It's so nice to be here. My God, what trouble I had getting here, though.
I think we're fine. Mark, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, enjoying the break. Watched Brighton for Chelsea last night, which terrified me. I've watched both Forest pre-season friendlies so far, and they're a long way off what I saw between Chelsea and Brighton. So I'm a bit worried about that. But yeah, no, it's good. I'm trying desperately not to look at any drafts and just keeping my mind off it, tinkering every now and then, but really it's very low touch at the moment, light touch I would say, on my FPL team right now.
Well, yeah, you won't even send me a draft, will you?
No, I don't want to. I'm not doing any.
Socials.
I've got a draft in progress, but I'm not taking it seriously yet. There's weeks to go yet before I'm going to start focusing on the draft.
Well, Mark, I'm not gonna lie. No one cares because it's not about you. This stream. It's not about me. It is about my apprentice, Nat, who joins. And if anyone wasn't aware, 2 years ago, Mark and I did a bit of an experiment. We got two sort of people who'd never played FPL before. One, we gave access to Scout, all the tools. We did like a bit of a tutorial session, and Nat joined Twitter and got involved in that. And Henry, Mark's apprentice, was given nothing and told to basically just be left to his own devices. Henry disappeared, never to be seen again, about halfway through the season. And I'm delighted to say that we're joined by @FPL_Parry, Nat, my apprentice, who is still an active member of the FPL community 2 years later. Nat, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm enjoying this, except that sometimes it gets too much.
Does it? Oh, okay, that's really interesting.
FPL gets too much, yes.
Well, it's really interesting because we've got some really interesting stuff to talk about. So your first season was I think was an absolutely massive success. You came in. We'll talk about exactly what happened, but as in terms of experiments go, it was great. Second season though, last season you struggled, didn't you?
Because I had a baby, and with
here come the
when you have a
excuses.
baby, no, there's a lot less time. You can't
That's a
give
good
that much
excuse.
time. It just takes up a lot of your time, so you don't end up giving that much time. So I didn't do a lot of things that I did in the first season.
Yeah. Well, let's go through the 2 seasons. So this was your first season. So just got some graphics up here. Mark and obviously that decided to do the apprentice, meet the candidates, and then it was a bit of a roller coaster because we were kind of watching how you both got on. I picked up my 2 kind of key moments from this. The first one was you started the season and you were. We talked about your research background. You were really into all the stats and everything like that, and then 1 week you went for Havertz captain, which was completely against everything that I thought you would do. Talk me through that.
You did not. I'm never going to hear the end of this. This is going to haunt me for the rest of my FPL life. But so I went to, of course, I was very new. This is game week 9. This is the first 9 weeks I've ever played FPL. And there is this whole Havertz, what do I call, like a Havertz tornado happening. Everybody is talking about Havertz, and he's the best thing, the hottest thing on the scene. And I said, well, why not? I can afford him and let me get him, and I don't have a budget constraint. I don't have any other problem. So I got him and just absolutely bombed. And I said, what just happened here? How is it that so many people wanted him? And I don't know if that many people got him, but was I the only idiot to do this?
Do you remember that week, Mark?
Was that the week where they won 9-0? Was that what we're talking about?
Yeah,
and
Norwich 9-0.
Yeah, Norwich 9-0, and Salah had United, right? Didn't he?
Yep.
And he got the hat trick at Old Trafford. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And do you
Yeah,
remember?
I
Do you
mean,
remember
that
that
was crazy,
Henry?
man.
Or Henry went Salah triple captain.
Yeah.
60 points. 60 from the captain, not 60 on the whole. 60 just from the captain.
So it
It
was
took me
7-0.
3 weeks to.
7-0.
Yeah, there was 7-0 and he didn't even get an assist.
Yeah.
And here
Didn't get
was the
anything.
person that everybody was talking about.
And he was
Well-
playing centre forward, wasn't he, as well? He was playing down the middle.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what happened there. It's still a mystery.
What was some of the other things you remember about that kind of first season? Because Mark and I weren't as kind of hands on with it as we maybe wanted to be. We kind of left you both to your own devices, but Henry wasn't really given any kind of introduction. Whereas you came on Twitter, you were talking to people, you were really getting involved. What were kind of some of the ups and downs, and how did Ankit, your husband, like kind of deal with you sort of being in that world with him?
No, he was very good. At one point, he stopped discussing right in the beginning because I think he wanted me to go into the apprentice with like a clean slate. But by and by, of course, he began to discuss every week what are we going to do and everything. And you won't believe me, but when I was in the OT having my baby, he was talking about Salah.
I mean, you can relate to that, can't you, Mark? I'm
Yeah,
sure.
definitely.
I was lying there and the doctor brought him in. I didn't know he could come in, but anyway, he came in and he was sitting next to me and he said, "Oh, you can talk to her." And he says, "Oh, we must get Salah." I'm thinking, what?
Well, that's what he was talking to you about while you were giving birth. That's crazy. I wouldn't do
Yes,
that.
like
I
so
wouldn't
I
go
was
that
having.
far.
Yes, he's doing this. And the doctor first said, "Okay, let her think positive thoughts." Then 2 minutes later, she says, "It's okay, you're doing well, continue." And I said, "Oh man, I have no relief from this."
To be fair, captaining Havertz in that game probably was as painful as childbirth, wasn't it? We can only imagine, but it must have been. Wow.
I
Havertz
remember.
had already happened. Havertz already happened by then. This is later
okay.
in the year.
Oh, okay.
It's not given.
Yeah.
Okay, that pain had happened already. Right.
So I'm guessing your son isn't called Kai or Havertz or any names along those lines.
So this season, I plan to make him watch football with me. He watches golf with his father, so I'll make him watch football now. I'll watch football.
There's quite a lot of like kind of new babies in the FPL community these days. I'm seeing quite a lot of the accounts that I follow are going off and having kids, and they're starting them quite young. Billy,
Yeah.
Mark's son, is I think on the verge of
Right,
really
right.
getting into it, isn't he, Mark?
Yeah, scary actually. Yeah, he's got his own TikTok channel. He's making videos, and yeah, I don't want to think about it really. He's more into the content creation than he is actually playing the game, though. That's the thing. So he's got to get decent at the game first before he can do that. He's got to do what Nat did, right? He's got to get into the game, get some good ranks, and then he can dabble with that stuff. But he's gone straight to content. But yeah, he's enjoying it.
I think it's the in thing because when I had the baby, I had people write to me on Twitter and say, "Make an account for him." I said, "Stop it. Let me get out of hospital first." They're telling me, "Make
Was
an
it just
account."
Ankit? Let's make him an
No,
account.
no, no. These are these people I befriended on Twitter and saying, "Let's make an account." By the time he's 10, he'll have 10 years of experience as an FPL player. And I said, "Are you serious?"
Got to
I love
start 'em
it.
young. Got to start 'em young. Premier League will love that.
I love it though because we, I mean, looking at some of the chat comments, Matt Francis felt sorry for Henry, got ignored and dropped off. I mean, it was kind of the idea to ignore Henry though. Like Henry, it was supposed to. He was like the kind of control group, right? Someone who was joining Twitter, and then we were going to leave him to see kind of how we got on with his kind of football knowledge.
But Henry was far more knowledgeable about football
Exactly.
when he started than Nat was, right? So
Exactly.
Nat, you had Ankit, but you didn't really have knowledge of teams and players like Henry did. So the idea was we take a football fan and see whether that knowledge was enough to get them through a season without using the community, Twitter, tools, websites, to see whether a football fan just with their knowledge could do well at FPL without that stuff. And the answer was no, they couldn't, because he did know his football and he started the season knowing the kind of players he ought to pick. But I think as the season wore on, he made some mistakes associated with the chips and the mechanics of the game. And I think the big advantage you had, Nat, was Twitter. I mean, Twitter, would you say Twitter was your biggest help to you early on?
Definitely. They were really good to me. They even told me at one point. I tweeted saying I couldn't focus because I had like work commitments, and they said, "Don't worry, we'll tell you everything."
See, it's interesting you say that because that is both like in some ways that's the good side of Twitter, right? Because people are helpful and trying to help you out, but it also is the kind of the bad side because people are, people say that it's so easy to get information now because you've got all these people making content, you've got people who just tweet telling you which players to get. And it's interesting that for someone like you who maybe hasn't got the time to make those decisions, you can just kind of follow people and do well. But a lot of people would maybe say that's not the best way to play the game. But it
That's
helped
true.
you. But it helped you in that first season.
True, true. Because I would sometimes put out my team and say, "This is what I've done," and then they would pick a problem that wouldn't have occurred to me at all.
Mm.
Maybe it's a player, maybe it's a formation, maybe one thing, and I would think, "Oh." So that's helped. It's definitely helped, and they've been very good to me.
It's
If
quite
Twitter's
interesting.
good for anything, as it's picking problems with your team, they're very
But
good at that.
But that is because I mean Nat sent me a screenshot of her team, which we're going to talk about a bit later, and it was your first draft, and I looked at it and I thought, okay, this is immediately I thought it was a strong team. But the one thing that I noticed was you had Cancelo in it, and so I said straight away, I was like, oh, you probably don't want to pick Cancelo because we don't think he's going to play. He's been on loan, and all that. Maybe go for one of the other Man City defenders. And that is where, if you're a new player to FPL, I think that is where Twitter can be so helpful. Because if someone's saying, "Oh no, don't pick Odegaard," he's rubbish, go for Martinelli instead. That is there's not a lot in it. But when it's literally telling you about players that maybe you aren't aware of being injured or coming back from injury or something like that, I guess for a new player, that's where it's quite helpful, right?
Of course, it's very helpful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the first season you beat Mark. Which is one of my favourite tweets displayed.
I had a bad season,
It's
didn't I?
like
But yeah, Natalie, you did so
I think
well
it
in
was
that
a
first season.
I think it was a complete fluke. I did that in the last 2 weeks, and with players from absolutely unreliable teams. I had these Leicester players. I had Everton and what is that other? Digne Cash and all those people. Danny Ings, Richarlison, all the people because they had double game weeks. That was the only reason. They were not even good teams, but they were the people who had double game weeks, and I just brought 6 or 7 of them in, and they sort of scored.
Yeah, they did well. Yeah, yeah. Okay. I mean that is it. And you would say that a lot of that was helped by posting your team to Twitter and sort of being helped by the community. Because I think that's interesting when we come onto your second season.
I know, not the last 2 weeks. That I just went by the double game week. But of
Okay.
course, through the journey, a lot of help on Twitter, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean that was the interesting thing, wasn't it, Mark? It was. I remember our first chats with Nat right at the start. And we were blown away, weren't we, by the attention to detail on some of the research she was doing, looking at XG. There was spreadsheets. I think they were maybe even color coordinated, and you came prepared to the chats we were having on Zoom with like a notepad, and you were like just ready to go. I just remember being kind of really, really impressed by that. But then it's interesting how Twitter's helped in that first season with that as well, because that was kind of the experiment, right? That was kind of what we were trying to look at, and it worked.
Yeah,
But
I wonder whether without Twitter, the onboarding process to FPL is streamlined, because I think there's no doubt now the level of information available there and the instant feedback you get. It wasn't there 5 years ago, was it? You didn't have that level of attention for. I guess it was on Scout then, basically, but now it's moved a lot to Twitter. And I think it is probably the best tool for someone starting off playing.
Yeah.
And that proved that, right?
yeah.
Yes, of course. I mean, initially, I didn't know which player belonged to which team. I was that bad. Sorry, I've dropped. So I didn't know I had this whole tweet where my husband took a photo because I was staring at this player and thinking, I'm trying to remember which team he's from. And someone came back on that post and someone replied and said, how are you playing FPL if you don't know this? And I kid you not, other people went and replied to that person before I did and said, don't you realize she's new to the field and she doesn't know anything? Don't make comments like this. I said, wow, here are these people fighting for me.
I think it's really nice because, like, at the moment, in particular, Twitter is coming under quite a bit of scrutiny, because it feels quite toxic at the moment. There is quite a lot of negativity going around. Certain people are being called out on various stuff. I've had a few nasty comments about things, and you see that side of it, and you can kind of write it off. But then your experience in your first year, I was kind of quite blown away with how people sort of took you under their wing and were defending you against other people and that kind of stuff. I think that was really nice.
I had a completely opposite experience. They were very nice to me.
Yeah. Well, so it was all great. First season, all great. You beat Mark. You have a few kind of highs and lows. You see Havertz, blank. You get in the double game week players. All that goes well. But overall, successful season. Second season starts last year. You can see on the left here, you start a YouTube channel. Incredible. When we started this whole thing, the thought of someone starting a YouTube channel would be amazing. And you did, and that's great. So you can find that on Twitter. But then everything started to unravel a bit, didn't it? And you started to really get into the frustrations that so many of us have on FPL. I mean, there's some comments on the right here. Who else has a pathetic score in spite of making multiple transfers to bring in players with double game weeks? So now suddenly double game weeks didn't pay off for you. Who else has a disappointing game week in spite of using their wildcard chip? Was another one. So you had a disappointing wildcard. And then another one, really disappointing start, double game week 29. Most of my players have got 1 point. And some of the comments of these, Mark, were really funny because they were just like, welcome, this is what it's really like.
That's right, yeah. It's not all roses, is it? I think you have to have the bad seasons, though. We know this. And you learn from it, right? And that's what Black Box is about. So I'll be interested to hear, Nat, what... I know that obviously with the baby, you probably didn't give it as much attention. But do you come out of that season having learnt a few things you're taking into this one?
Yes, I did. So I did things differently in the second season from the way I did them in the first season. But I feel like I didn't give it as much time. And I know I said the baby, of course, but also there are a lot of other things I got caught up with. And it's not just the baby. I love my child, but children do take up your time. But there were a lot of other things that I got caught up with. And I feel like I wasn't as committed, probably, to the whole thing. I was not watching matches. I didn't do some of the things, like I didn't follow through on my hunches sometimes, and that's always hurt me. There are times when I thought, oh, I must get this player in, and it's not the popular choice, but I would just feel that I had to get him in or I had to captain someone, and I didn't do it because I went and reasoned it out, and after reasoning it out, I didn't feel right, and later when I didn't do it, I just, it just backfired, and then that person actually got a lot of points or did something amazing, and I said, why don't I listen to myself? But I always sat and reasoned and then left the hunch, like just forgot about the hunch. And I feel like I just need to follow through with my hunches now. Most of the times they're right. And it's not like it happens every week, but whenever it does happen.
You didn't have a disastrous season. You in your first season, you finished 150k, which I think is amazing for a first season. Second season, you finished 272k, so just a bit worse than that. Amazingly, you had one less point in that second season than you did in that first season. 2,471 in your second, 2,472 in the second. So that 1 point, and the difference was obviously more points. In that kind of second season, because that's why you finished a bit further down. And another thing that's interesting is that, Mark, we talk about two things on Blackbirds, don't we? We talk about kind of confidence in a way, which sounds ridiculous, but like in your picks, in your decision making, when you start making bad calls, you then lose that confidence to then back yourself to make the next one to be right. But Mark, you also talk about how you play your best when you're so involved and invested in it, whereas I feel like I'm the opposite. I'm best when I take a bit of a step back. What do you think about all of that?
Yeah, I guess, you saw the second half of the season that I had, that once I started having a few calls went right, then I was able to chain them together, and there's no reason for that other than, I guess, you start backing yourself a bit more, whereas when you're doing badly, I play within myself more, if anything. And so I'll be interested, Nat, did you feel that? I guess you've said this, right? You didn't follow your hunches, and because of that, was that because things weren't going quite as well in the first season, where you were getting good scores, so therefore you were just chaining together good game weeks, whereas in the second season, did you feel that because you were having a few bad weeks, you were less likely to back yourself and follow the hunches. Was that the case?
In a way, plus I feel that since I don't know that much of football, like some of the other people do, I'm still sort of raw, I feel, to the whole football world, not just FPL or English Premier League. So I feel that sometimes my hunches, I don't know if I have the expertise or the knowledge to have a hunch to begin with. So I think maybe this is just a silly thing that's occurred to me and maybe I shouldn't follow through with it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you're quite a kind of a rare person, I think, playing the game in the sense that you haven't really had loads of exposure to football over the years, and you probably did have quite a lot in that first year, more probably considerably more than you had before watching matches and things, and that helped. And then the second year, even though you're not a huge football fan in the sense that you want to go to all the matches and watch every game, you watch less football in the second year, and then your hunches. You still follow. You've got those hunches, but they're not sort of maybe followed through with as you want. You kind of lose that confidence. Do you think watching the football then is as important as kind of all the other aspects? You know, the Twitter crowd, the stats, and everything like that.
I now feel it is. In the first season, we watched a lot of football because sort of till half the season I hadn't had a baby at all, so I could easily sit down and watch matches. Second season, I think I watched very few matches. Most of the times I didn't. So it was all spreadsheets and data and whatever I feel about someone is in form or things like that. But I realize now that everything is not stats or Excel. I think I do need to watch matches. So I think that's one thing that I absolutely missed out on in the second season. I watched very few matches.
That's a point for Grass FC, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because what you're saying there is actually there's a lot of people who now play the way you're saying there. They play a lot with with spreadsheets or the equivalent of, and go with data and numbers rather than actually relying on what they watch in the matches. In a way, they feel that can sometimes be noise that they don't want. So it's interesting that you feel as an FBL manager you need to watch matches. I think we're all different. I think we all, I've said this before, we all have our own way of wanting to play the game, and I think watching matches and letting that have some influence on what you do is important. It's the basis of the game is there to draw us to watch football, and I think that's got to be one input into picking your team. It might not be always the main input, but it's certainly a factor, I think. And it's interesting that you feel because you watched less football, you had didn't quite have as enjoyable a season the second time round. What about Haaland? What impact did Haaland have on you? Were you aware? When did you become aware just how ridiculous he was as a captain? Was that early on, or did you miss some of his points?
So I heard about Haaland first time pre-season. I heard someone talking about him. I think it was Let's FP. I'm not sure which channel it was, but one of those people were talking about him. And I didn't know who he was because he wasn't there the previous season. I just searched about him on Google. And then I said, okay, we'll take him. And I think by the first few weeks, he had begun to perform. And then I brought him on. I don't think I had him in the first week.
Yeah,
but
we can relate to that.
Very early on. Very early on, he began to have his explosive, returns. So I jumped on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
Okay, so he didn't hurt you then, so that was okay. Yeah, it was a very, obviously if you missed out on a couple of those hat tricks like I did, it was painful and you were making up ground. So it's good that you were quickly on that. And I think it'll be interesting to see if he's going to be a bigger factor next time around. We imagine he will be, and he'll be very well owned and so on. What about effective ownership? Do you look at that? Because I think if I remember rightly, were you using ownership to pick your team initially at all? And do you actually look at, well, this player's owned by 50% of the game, so therefore I should maybe have him? Do you factor that in?
No, I don't. Till date, I think maybe I should, but till date, I have not bothered with effective ownership. It's probably a bad thing, but I just haven't.
As is the same.
That's what she's my apprentice, Mark.
I know.
Yeah, that was really. I mean, this is your talking about kind of the team and stuff. This is the draft that you sent me over. So, like I said, the original draft you sent me did have Cancelo, and actually, ironically, me telling you to drop Cancelo, he's actually got an assist like today for Man City, so he might actually end up being a good pick. But this is the team you sent me over. It's Pickford in goal. It's James, Gabriel, Dalot, and Stones. It's Bruno Fernandes, Maddison, Rashford, and Matoma, and then Haaland and Jesus up front, with a 4 million goalkeeper, Bruno Guimaraes, Baldock, and Surridge. So this team, Nat, how much of an influence has Twitter had on this team? Has it had any at all?
None.
None.
I haven't gone on Twitter at all yet.
Don't you think that's interesting, Mark, looking at this
That
team?
is really interesting, yeah. Because, people like, Baldock in there as a 4 million defender, going with Surridge as a player who's likely to leave Premier League as your striker, so it's not going to go down. Those picks are kind of like what you're seeing on Twitter. But the basis of it, Jesus and Haaland are very
but who's
popular
missing?
pairing.
There's two interesting players, I think, missing from this draft. Firstly, it's Saka, who is the Twitter darling. You haven't got any Arsenal midfielders after they did so well last season, and you just won't find a draft on Twitter without Saka on it, Nat. So I know exactly what's going to happen. You're going to go on Twitter after this, look at all the drafts, and go, "Oh, okay, I better bring in Saka." But what I think is really interesting, Mark, is no Salah in this. It's interesting that even without any kind of community-led, discussion, you've chosen just to go with the one premium, Nat, and not go for Salah, who's been so good for us in previous seasons. Why have you decided not to select him?
Because I feel like Liverpool's fixtures turn more favourable from about game week 8 or 9 onwards. So I have focused more on the fixture ticker and tried to pick from the teams that had good fixtures. So I was thinking of getting in Liverpool players a bit later on. Similarly with Newcastle.
And that's why you've gone for no Trent as well at the back. Yeah.
Similarly with Newcastle, I think their fixtures start getting better from about game week 5. So that's where I would start focusing on them probably.
So fixtures have been the biggest influence on this team, and you can see that with James, Matoma, the two Manchester United midfielders. So would you say then you're heavily guided by fixtures? Has that been something you've kept the faith in?
I have looked at the fixtures a lot, and also the other thing is that I have a few of the preseason matches. There are teams that have done well in that, like Arsenal's done really well, and there's Man U that's done really well against Arsenal, I think, and Arsenal and Chelsea have got 5-0 wins. So has Crystal Palace actually, but and also Man U's been able to keep clean sheets in about 2 or 3 matches. So I have looked at that as well, but Chelsea, I'm still not sure about. So I have a Reece James. I've picked one person, and I might switch it for a Chilwell or something later. But if he turns out to be injured or something, but yeah, I have also looked at that.
That leads me so nicely on to my next screen that I can't even tell you how that isn't planned. Because I've got a short thing on pre-season here, and it's really interesting you talk about pre-season, because Mark, I think you and I are going to talk about the pre-season results and what that means in a bit more detail. But just looking at some of the pre-season results, I mean, looking at Man City's big win today, I mean, they were 2-0 behind in that, but they came back and won that 5-3. Man United beating Arsenal 2-0. Arsenal did get that big win against the MLS All-Stars as well. And then the great match last night of Chelsea and Brighton. I was going to ask you, Nat, how much stock do you put into this pre-season stuff? Because you are you have been such a data-driven manager kind of in the past. And then you look at Twitter, and Twitter gets so excited by some of these bandwagons. I'm seeing Jackson get mentioned by people. João Pedro, I think, Mark, you said you had him in one of your drafts because you liked what you saw last night against Chelsea and things like that. So you're saying that you use pre-season results to help you with your team selection game week 1?
Sort of. So I looked at the fixture ticker. I saw the preseason results. Now, what I've done actually is on Fantasy Football Scout, there are articles. There's this tables for players, and then there is a fixture ticker that is a different sort of fixture ticker, which is relative sort of, which is called the best. What is it called? The best fixture runs or something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of thing. So there's a whole page, and you can click on various articles and read. So I've actually looked at that a lot to study to try and make
She's
my
doing a
team.
better job at plugging the partner than we are. We didn't tell you to say any of that, but we forgot our plug for Fantasy Football Scouts, but you've just done it for us, Nat, so thanks for that.
But I just find it so interesting, like with Nat, because Nat is obviously a really kind of committed person to playing FPL and trying to get better. But at the same time, seeing someone come into the world for the first time and seeing the tools that you find useful and pick up on, like you're talking about the fixtures and how important they are, talking about the preseason things on Scout. I just think it's really, really interesting. And I think we kind of did this experiment when, to kind of say to the Premier League, well, this is kind of what you need to do to get someone to be more engaged, right, Mark? And it's like, it's not enough, is it, just to give someone the keys and go on? You need to give them these extra bits to create that engagement.
Clearly not. I mean, Henry proved that, right? He didn't kind of grasp some of the stuff that the community and the websites perhaps bring out, the content creators as well. There is now so much that I don't know if I can imagine playing the game without any of that, right? I think Henry was reading the Scout articles on the Premier League, and that was the limit of it. And clearly, to hear Natalie speaking about how she's used Scout and she's aware of some of the tools there, you can see the value that she's got from that. I mean, like, everyone's got their own way of playing. As I said before, everyone weights things differently. Obviously, at the moment, you haven't had the influence of Twitter. I'd be really interested to see how much your team changes when you do engage with Twitter.
Me too.
When do you plan to do that? Are you kind of thinking maybe like a week before the start of the season, or are you going to go earlier than that?
So I actually, okay, I'll be honest here. I hadn't made a team. So when Az wrote to me saying, "Send me your team," I said, "What team?" Then I sat and started, trying to put the players together and trying to figure out who I want.
Going for a low team ID, Nat. Clearly.
So then I said, okay, who do I want? Then I was anyway reading all these news, the preseason page on FF Scout and things like, and I have these tables. So I have made these tables. They're under FPL Pari. They're public tables, which have parameters for defenders, midfielders, and forwards. So I have these tables. I have the stats on that, but that I've had since like last season. But I opened this page fresh, this whole preseason page, and there is player stats and preseason minutes tracker. Now, this preseason minutes tracker, of course, my husband told me. I didn't know what that was. But but I looked at all this and I said, okay, now let's figure out who we want to get in the team. And then, of course, there's the budget. So you know who you can afford and who you can't. But yeah, that's when I was reading the news so far, but I had to get into all these fixtures and everything because I had to make a team.
So it's all Az's fault. You picked the team so far. It's the same with me. He's bullying me into picking a team as well.
Well, here's a question for you, though. If I hadn't messaged you and asked you to make a team, how long would you have left it until you had made one?
Probably a week before the deadline.
Isn't that interesting?
No,
Mark?
that's about right. I think that's the right thing to do. I mean, like we have to name a team to get the low ID, which we're silly like that.
Do you know about that, Nat? Do you know about the low team IDs on Twitter? Yeah.
So we've done that, and I think I've changed my team 3 or 4 times so far. Normally by now I've done about 50, 60 drafts. So I've deliberately kept off it, and I'm thinking my most intense period of change will come in that last week, which is when you plan to pick your team, Nat. So I'm going at it from a similar old school approach this summer. What are you doing the same as? Are you kind of, because you're doing a lot of content for Scout as well, aren't you? So it's difficult for you to do that.
Well, not so much. I mean, I did my first video for Scout last week with Sam. We brought the Q&A back, which is, that's a nice kind of casual interactive thing. It hasn't got to rely on me looking at loads of data and stats and things. We just answer questions on that. I'm doing a solo video on the BlackBox channel every week, which, Andy and I did some team ratings again. I did like my first draft. I'm not really making many changes to my team because we haven't really got any new information about things, and I kind of like what I've made. I think the template is strong again, and my team is gravitating towards that, and I wanted to stay away from it, and I intended to stay away from it, but then I did a video with Andy which was rating team drafts, and then as soon as I started it I was like, well, now I'm obviously not going to stay away from the template because now I'm going to see it when I'm looking through all these. But it didn't really influence me very much. I think the one player that I am starting to get influenced by because of Twitter is Fernandez. He's the one. And if that's going to be paired with pre-season form that he's in, playing higher up the pitch, You know, because I was like, because everyone's going 8.5, he's so underpriced and all this, and I was kind of like, yeah, but he hasn't been that great an option for us for a few years now. But I'm starting to get a bit concerned about him, and I can feel that coming from Twitter. That kind of, because I think I'd be more stubborn on it if I wasn't.
So I'm avoiding Twitter as well. So I'm not looking at any drafts that I see on Twitter at all. I'm reading another post, but I'm not looking at drafts because I found that immediately I started looking at a draft. I think I saw one of General's early drafts, and I went and made a change straight away. So the influence is so clear that when you look at 5 or 6 drafts in a day or more than that, you're gonna, when you then look at your own team, make changes. So it's interesting that you're going to stay clear till the last week, and then do you think you're going to post your team up and go, what are your thoughts? Are you going to invite feedback?
I might, but I'm not sure right now, but I might actually, because there are so many people that know so much more than I do. So for me, it's just a lot of knowledge.
But do you not think that you want to keep some identity of your own in the team? Is that something you're like? Is there 1 or 2 players you think, well, no matter what people tell me, I want to keep those players because I know I want those 2? Do you have any of that at all?
That happens because the thing is, I don't listen to everything they say, but I want to hear what's coming, their opinion, and they know so much more. And they're very nice. They tell me a lot of things, but not necessarily do I make all the changes that are suggested. So I will sometimes stick up Cristiano Ronaldo is my biggest problem. Like for so many weeks, I just couldn't let go of him because of the halo effect that we had suddenly got Cristiano Ronaldo here. And even if he wasn't performing, so I would have him, and then he wouldn't perform, and then I would remove him, and he would perform.
Yeah,
And I was always falling in the bad spots sort of thing. And I just couldn't get rid of him. I kept him on the bench for so long, even with Reece James. Because I saw him. Reece James was the one player initially that I picked on an eye test. He was the only one. I saw him defend a goal, and I can't remember which match it was. And he was so good. I said, I want this person in my team, regardless of what happens.
We've
I
all
didn't
had
understand
that.
what fixtures. Yeah, I didn't know what fixtures were at that point. I didn't know what was happening, but I wanted that one player. So by hook or by crook, I had to get him. I got him, and then sometimes he would perform, and sometimes he wouldn't, and he would get injured. I kept putting him on the bench.
You don't
The
like that,
number
don't
of
you,
weeks
Mark?
he spent on the bench for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
We all-
frustrating player, isn't he?
We all have that though, don't we? I mean, that to me is why all the stats and the things kind of loses that emotional side, because I love that emotional side of it. I love it when you watch a match, you think, I've just got to have that player. I remember you early on when I started watching Scout, Mark, had it with Hazard. I remember you watched him play a match and he just absolutely blew a team away. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter what anyone said or anything. It didn't matter. It was just one match, because everyone, a lot of the stats people say, well, it's just one match. You can't make decisions on that. But sometimes you just see something, you're like, I've just got to go. I've just got to go for that.
Yeah, again, I guess it's the what you want from the game, and if you enjoy watching a player, having him in your team adds to that enjoyment, doesn't it? So sometimes you kind of maybe leave what's optimal to one side, and you go, I'm going to go for that player because I just want to have him on my team. I'm like that with Trent. Even if I know people might be thinking, let's go without Trent. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but I'll always have him because I love him as a player, and even more so if he's going to be more involved in attacking areas in the middle of things like he could be this season. So I have soft spots for players, and I like to entertain those where possible, which probably isn't the right thing to do, but it's the way I like to play.
I think we're both like that. Just before we kind of start wrapping this up, just want to come back to one thing that you said a minute ago now, which I thought was really interesting, and that's this idea of kind of you feel like you don't really have that knowledge to sometimes make decisions, so you look to other people to help you. And I think again that is where FPL these days on Twitter and on Scout gets such a bad rep, because there's this feeling that people are being spoon-fed information and the game's more difficult now because you get all this information. But I think your experience with it just shows that FPL need to go down that route to make the game more accessible, to give people that information, to make them feel like they've got a chance to kind of compete and enjoy it. Because if you're going to be filling your team up with players, I'll use Cancelo as an example, but he might end up becoming the best player in FPL next season. But if you're going to go for players like Cancelo or players that aren't going to play and you don't have that information, you're just going to get put off right from the start, aren't you? And you're going to be playing catch up to a lot of people. So having the ability to easily get the information for a completely new player without much football experience is a massive help, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
definitely. And I've done things there are a lot of things, lessons I learned from the first, season that I played. And I did things differently in the second season. And maybe I will still do things differently in this season. I don't know. But there were a lot of things I learned. I used to play very haphazardly in the first season. I don't know how my rank was a lot better then than it was in the second season, but
Mm.
there were a lot of things that I was doing, that were conceptually wrong.
The third season could be really interesting to see because I mean I think first two seasons to finish 150k and 270k. I think there's people out there would bite your hand off for those two ranks in your first two
But
seasons.
I was such a haphazard player in the first season. I would just bring someone in, then not be able to leave him. I would do a fixing job, like, oh, this is a problem, throw this person out, get somebody else in. I would not understand that you have to look ahead. You have to plan for the next 5 or 6 weeks, something. Yeah, I just wouldn't.
So then in the second
I would
season you start planning ahead and then you do even worse. That sounds about right, doesn't it, Mark? That sounds like FPL.
It
In the
is. I
second
mean,
season, the big mistake I made was having triples. I feel like even having triple from a strong team is not a good thing sometimes.
Yeah.
what's your goal for this season, Nat? What are you thinking? You just going to try and beat that 150k rank, or have you got a bigger goal than that?
No, I want to do. I automatically thought that I will get better, and my second season I will do better than the first season. I know that I was helped by a certain amount of luck in the first season, but I still somehow thought that because I'm more knowledgeable now, I understand better than whatever base level I started at. I will the rank will improve, but it didn't. It went backwards somehow.
So yeah, 100k probably is that the target? Another kind
So
of rank.
I'm hoping I'll beat my previous ranks.
Yeah.
So that's what.
Okay. There's a great comment from Matt Francis in the chat, which is they need to make the chips easier to understand. So many use them without knowing their power. And you mentioned that earlier, Mark, with Henry. Is he blew those chips? I mean, okay, he got rewarded with the Salah one, but we definitely weren't expecting him to use it in that week. And then I remember the free hit, I think, gained him 4 points when I was looking back on some of the messages we'd sent and things like that. So clearly there is some. They're doing a lot for the educational side of with the content that's being produced to help people like that out, but there's still more they could do to help people realise things like that and how important they are.
Yeah, I think the first having chips for the first half of the season and the second half would be the way to go.
So
Because
do I.
if people play their chips before they've really understood the mechanics of the game and what's likely to happen with double game weeks, it doesn't matter because they get a second set. Still don't understand why they don't do that, because it would have helped Henry because he played his free hit, like you said, before the double game weeks, and then when the blanks came along, he didn't have the free hit, and you fall away, don't you? So it's a really important part of the game.
And we were able to explain that to you, Nat, quite early on because we kind of talked you through some of these things. But I imagine if we hadn't done that, you probably would have gone down a similar route to Henry and used those chips.
Absolutely might have. I can't say. And we were lucky in that season that we had 2 free hits.
Mm.
We were given 2 free hit chips, right, for that
That's
one
right.
season.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. So again, if you don't know what you're doing with any of those, then it's going to be harder. No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely fascinating stuff. Yeah, we're all. I mean, we still got this Apprentice League. Nat, you were thrashing Mark for most of last season. I thought you were going to make it 2 out of 2, but unfortunately, he fought back. I think you were 60 or 70 points behind that at one point, Mark. And
Right. No, he returned the favor.
he did.
Caught you up in the end, but yeah, it was an interesting.
last 4 or 3 weeks or 2-3 weeks. I think that's
Yeah.
where
Yeah,
the win.
and
It's
then as
pretty
beat
similar
me
to
at
what
the
happened.
end.
I know.
Yeah, it was a
I
thrilling
like
end to the
1 point.
season.
It was.
So yeah, I mean, overall though, Natalie, are you pleased that it has introduced you to the game? Have you enjoyed it?
Yes, I have. Though I think sometimes it gets very frustrating in terms of all the changes that happen, and suddenly this match is getting cancelled, and there is a double game week here, and something else has happened. Someone's having a blank, someone's having a double. So it's just very frustrating because suddenly you have like less players. You don't have enough people playing. Sometimes you have too many people playing. You don't know who to bench. But yes, it can get very frustrating.
We're hoping for a bit more normality to be resumed. Although we've already got Luton postponed game week 2, so it's maybe not gonna help. But yeah, I mean, in terms of just a final question, in terms of like Ankit and your kind of relationship and things. I mean, do you feel like it's helped like your relationship? Do you think it's nice having that kind of common ground to talk about, or do you sometimes wish that you could kind of have a break from it and you're getting just as frustrated as he is?
So it goes. So when I got married, his laptop would never be off. Anytime he was home, there would be Mark Goldbridge on the laptop on loud. The whole house would be this Mark Goldbridge's voice all across the house because he's a Man U fan. And this would go on the whole day. Every time he was home, that's what would go on. He'd come back from work, that would switch on. And I used to think, my God, there's not a moment of silence in this house because in my house, my parents don't play anything all the time. There's television for, let's say, 2 hours or 3 hours, and that's it. And other times we are out or whatever we're reading. And then once I began to do this, I said, okay, we are going to do this together. So it became more interesting than to just have this background stuff, which you're not really focusing on, but it's just on all the time. But now I actually listen to what is happening, unless I'm really doing something else. I will listen and I will understand most of it. Not everything.
And that's a good thing. You think that's a
Good thing. Though
Okay.
sometimes I do want him to put it off because it just interferes with whatever else you're trying to do. But it is, in a way, it's a good thing.
There you go. Anyone who's listening to this and wants their partners to get involved in FPL, there's a ringing endorsement there from that. You understand a little bit more, and it's a bit more tolerable. That's about as much you can hope for, isn't it, Mark?
I think that's great. I think that's a good result for you. I was worried for a minute. I thought she was going to say, after I heard about him talking to her while I give him birth about football, I thought it might be the final straw.
He's gone too
What have you
far.
done, Az? But no, it sounds like you've enhanced the relationship, which is
Absolutely.
great. So
Well, and that takes me even more nicely onto my final section, which is actually something I haven't told either of you either. But, oops, that's the wrong screen. Hang on. I'm bringing this back. I'm bringing it back next season. I would absolutely love to have another FPL BlackBox Apprentice. I will take them under my wing, like I did with Nat. I'm looking for someone with no experience with FPL, who's comfortable on video, and would be interested in teaming up with me next season to try and emulate really what Nat's been doing. So if you're interested, if you know anyone who sort of fits that criteria, might be interested, get them to drop me an email as@fplblackbox.com. They'll be added into our apprentice league. You'll be battling it out with Mark and Nat and me.
You didn't tell me this, Az.
No.
This is a surprise to me.
But yeah, I loved it. I loved getting to know Nat. I really enjoyed when you started setting up the YouTube videos and doing that, and I just thought that was an absolutely amazing result for us Mark, to have brought someone into the world of FPL and to see just how much you enjoyed it, and to hear you talking now. I was hoping you'd give me a positive answer when I said, did it help your relationship with Ankin? No, it's much worse than it was, and all that. So no, that's it's really nice to hear that you're engaged again. You're going to play again next year, going into your third season. So yeah, anyone who knows anyone who might be interested, drop me a line and let's try and get another apprentice next season.
Ooh, nice.
Let's do it. I'm looking forward to that. That'll be good. I want to see what we get in terms of. They'll be hard pushed to come up to Nat standards.
I know. I mean, I even watched back your Nat sent in like an audition video to us, which was if you remember doing that, which was talking about coming on.
2 hours.
Took 2 hours. It was absolutely brilliant. It's an absolutely brilliant video. So
Because Ankit wrote such a script for me that it took me so much time to memorize it and then come, because I didn't want to have cuts. I want to do it at one go. So I had to memorize the whole thing and say, now let's just shoot.
it was so good, and we saw that, and we were like, that's the one. We're definitely getting you involved. So you have got a hard thing to beat if you are watching this. Although I'm guessing you're not watching this if you're going to be an apprentice, because you probably are already playing FPL.
But your partner might be.
But your partner, friends, sons, daughters, anyone who is looking, just and they're up for it. But give me a shout. But other than that, it's been so good catching up with you. It's been far too long, despite all the tech issues.
So excited.
We got there.
I felt so bad that I was not being able to come on. And I'm sorry for disappearing in the middle. Actually, I dropped my notes.
You
I
did.
had notes.
Don't worry.
It was
always dropping his notes.
It
I
was.
was studying so much for this. I actually have notes.
There you
It
go.
was-
Dedication again. See.
I know.
That's what
It's
you need.
every time. It's it's absolutely brilliant to have you on, and and like I said, Mark and I have been late plenty of times over the years. I'm sure we were half an hour late once, Mark, because you hadn't turned your microphone on. So
something like that. I threw a beer over my equipment about a couple of months ago, didn't I, as well?
You did, yeah.
All goes wrong.
Absolutely. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy this. Hopefully something a bit different to, rating teams and team drafts and everything like that. Like I said, hopefully I'll be bringing back the Apprentice next season, and I'll be trying to stay a bit more on top of that, and with kind of regular check-ins with whoever we get on. Mark and I are planning a proper FPL Black Box this week, so look out for that. I'm not totally sure what day that's going to be on, but it will be at some point this week. I hope. You're going to finally show us a draft, Mark?
I suppose so. I'm a bit grumpy when it comes to drafts. I don't. I'm steering clear of it. I want to keep my powder dry until the final week, like Natalie. So I'm very much signed up for that. But I will show a draft, I guess. Yes.
Oh, there you go. If there's any reason to tune in, it's a reluctant draft from Mr. Sullins.
I suppose you don't have anybody at home pushing you, like
no, I
Ankit used to
don't.
push me.
No,
I think it's very much the opposite.
Definitely.
In the beginning, Ankit used to literally push me. He would tell me at 10 in the night that, you need to understand this stats. And I'm thinking, what? And because I'm sleepy and I'm pregnant. And he says, no, get pen and paper. I'm like, no. He said, no, I'll go to office tomorrow morning, so I won't meet you. He goes pretty early. So he says, go get pen and paper. I'm like, no. And one day I was telling my mother, he makes me write stats at 10 in the night. And she's like, what? 10 in the night? I said, he makes me write stats at 10 in the night.
Mark, can you please start doing this to Pip and just see how she reacts?
Oh my God. Wow. Yeah.
That is incredible. You're a lucky man, Ankit. You've definitely hit the jackpot with Nat. Cool. Anyway, thank you everyone. Mark and I'll be back later in the week. And we'll see you all very soon. Good night.
Bye bye.
It was so nice talking to both of you. Bye.